Okay, I've started the recording now, so that you guys, as you know, this the recording of this session will be available to you afterwards. I will upload it on YouTube. So at some point tomorrow, probably I'll download it off Blackboard and I'll put it up on YouTube, and then you guys can listen to it there afterwards when you, if you want to, or anybody who's not on the session tonight will be able to access it there. Okay. All right, so I'm very happy to see that there are plenty of you online. That's fantastic. And I have had some questions from quite a few students this week since I put out those couple of emails, which I'm also super happy about, because guys, that's the way to do it. Please, please don't sit at home tearing your hair out and messaging each other to say, I don't understand anything, if you don't let me know where you're battling. So you must let me have specific questions. There's not much I can do with something that says I don't understand anything, because that's very hard for me to address. So the way to do it is to, as I've said also in a couple of the announcements that I've put up, that you have to go through your textbook. Your textbook is what contains all of the information that you need to pass this module. And if you don't cover everything in the textbook, that means read the text, go through the examples that follow throughout the text, understand them, practice with the examples, make sure that you follow what they've done, and then when you get to the end of that section, there's always a question, and then you practice to see, can I do the question if I follow the example in the text? And where you're stuck, then you consult the solution. That's the way to do this module. And if you don't work through all of the learning units like that, by the time you get to the exam, you'll never have time to catch everything up, and you are definitely going to battle. So obviously it's easier with the assignment, because with the assignment you've got the textbook in front of you the whole time that you're working. So I can't emphasize enough, guys, that that is what you must do. Okay, it's not a suggestion, it's not a I'm not just saying that because I feel like that you guys should go through the textbook. It's the only way to pass this module. All right. Okay, so Lunga, hopefully you can hear now, because we've started. And everybody else okay with sound? If you can hear me, I guess. Yeah. You can just put a thumbs up, or as long as somebody, perfect, Norman, thanks. Okay. And then Hannah, I haven't had any feedback yet. The moment I do get anything at all, I will let you know if there is any feedback. Again, we have to try and assess how many students that this affects. In other words, was it a Wisebook problem that they didn't have textbooks to supply to anybody, or is it only an issue with students who were late reg or that order late? So and you know, it's completely out of my hands. This is it's an administration head office issue, so I have to abide by whatever they do. I have put your case forward, and they investigate. Okay, yeah, but out of stock, when did you order? Like, Hannah, did you register right at the beginning of the course and order straight away, or were you a late reg? Evan, yes, that's what I've advised the students to do, is waiting for your textbook to go to your nearest campus and go and work in the library. You can either go and work in the library with the textbook. Sometimes they don't always allow you to take out, if it's a textbook for a course that's live and they've only got 2 copies, they don't allow students to take them away from the campus, so that everybody gets a fair chance with the textbook. But you can certainly go and sit in the library and work for a day or an afternoon or a morning if you go in there on a weekend and work with the textbook. And the campuses always have, well, I know here in Gqeberha, they've always got more than 1 copy of the textbook. There's usually 2, 3, 4, 5 copies if you include the older copies. And it doesn't matter if you, for this module, it doesn't matter if you work with a textbook that's 2, 3, or 4 years old, the content has not changed. Okay, so even if you can get hold of an older one or you work with an older one in the library, then that's fine. Okay, Evan, so they said you can borrow from the library for 7 days. Okay, I'm quite surprised that they allow you to take it for 7 days, but that's perfect if you can do that. And they do have several copies. And also, obviously, it depends on which campuses that you guys are close to. So Shavana said she got hers today. How long ago did you order yours, Shavana? How long did you have to wait? Okay, that's quite long. 3 weeks is a pretty long time. So if it was an out of stock situation, hopefully that means that they have now got stock and everybody will get their textbooks soon. And Hannah, how long ago did you order? Also about 3 weeks. Yeah, okay. All right. So yeah, so remember, I think it was last week already, when the issue first arose, I said, please guys, go to the library if you need. I know it's not always possible for everybody. If you guys are working and you can only go on a weekend, or perhaps you don't live close to a campus, I do understand that. So we'll just have to do our best. I will follow up tomorrow again with the online head and just see what they've discussed about it, if anything, and then I'll come back to you. At this point, they haven't changed anything, so we have to just go on as if the due date is still next week, Wednesday, 22nd. Okay. It is a bit of a shocker when the semester starts and from day one we have to hit the ground running. That is, we've got 12 academic weeks, and in those 12 academic weeks we have to work every single day and just keep going. So it's you guys are third year, so you must have been already, you probably already, most of you have studied online already for a year or two, so you know the drill. It is tough, and you completely have my sympathy. I know it's not easy, it is tough. Okay, so all right, so what I want to cover this evening, it is what we call the NSS National Support Session for Assignment 1. So this collab that we have this evening is basically dedicated to your questions about the assignment. And also I'm going to go and give you some background to the assignment, things to watch out for, places where students lose marks commonly. And that's not just you guys, it's over all the years that I've been lecturing. There's certain things that students over all modules continuously do and where they lose questions. So I'm just going to highlight that so that you can go and double check yourself. Have I made those? Have I fallen into those same traps? So you can double check that you're not losing marks unnecessarily, because you want to get really good marks for your assignments to set yourself up nicely for the exam. I haven't uploaded your Ass yet this week, purely because you guys are so deep in the assignment, which is due in a week's time. So I'm not trying to confuse anybody with Ass, but that will be going up. What's tomorrow, Thursday? I might still upload it this week. If not, it will be early next week. Okay, so that your Ass, you know, is also important. I just don't want you to get distracted with Ass now before your first assignment. There's no need for that. There's plenty of time to do Ass, and you'll cope very well with that. Okay, so this first document that I've got up on the screen here now is what I call the assignment brief, which is really just some heads up issues around the submission of the assignment that you've got to take note of, and instructions that you must follow. Okay, so assignment is due 22nd of March. That's next Wednesday at 9 p.m. So also remember, just from that time, 9 p.m., your assignment has to already be uploaded, finished in class. You don't start uploading it 5 to 9 or 2 minutes to 9, or I would even say at 10 to 9, you're already pushing things too far. Remember, we've got things like load shedding, you've got Wi-Fi issues, you can have a whoopsie with your laptop, anything can go wrong. So just make sure that your assignment is uploaded a good couple of hours before that 9 p.m. deadline. If you do, and I have got this on here somewhere, okay, this over here, please allow enough time prior, etc. No concession is made for late uploads. And again, this is not in my control. The system will mark your assignment late if it goes up at 9:01 or any number of seconds past 9 p.m. It marks your assignment late and I'm not allowed to mark it. You then have to apply on the Student Hub for late submission and for permission for me to mark it if the assignment is late. Okay, and they have told us, I'm sure they've told you guys in your orientation as well, they are not taking load shedding as an excuse. They say we all know what our load shedding schedules are. We all know what our situation is with load shedding, and so we have to manage ourselves around that. Okay, so please just take note of all that. This will be on the document as well that you've got. And then also, while we're talking about this, because I often get this, if you do encounter any technical problem, so that means some kind of IT related problem, you're getting some kind of IT error, or you've got a technical problem on your side, then don't contact me because I won't be able to help you at all. We've got no access to the back end of the system or to the software at all, obviously to keep the neutrality of the tutor, what's the word? To keep that neutrality of the tutor. From an ethical point of view, we don't have any access to anything at all. So you must then log a ticket or raise an issue on through your student platform immediately and take a screenshot. And your screenshot must include a timestamp at the bottom of your screen to prove that you were trying to upload before 9 o'clock and that you got some kind of a software error or a technical issue. Okay, so that we can sort it out for you afterwards. But again, don't send a message to me to say, ma'am, I was trying to upload and it gave me an error, because again, tutors are not able to help with that. So just remember, hopefully nothing will go wrong, but guys, we know it is the age of, as I say, load shedding and computers and Wi-Fi, and anything can go wrong. So we just have to cover ourselves. And if there is a genuine problem, there's no ways that they will penalize you for it. You will be allowed to submit your assignment. I will be allowed to mark it, but you have to cover yourself, showing that you were ready before 9 o'clock to upload your assignment. Okay, so then the other thing is that with these finance modules, these are numeric assignments, and your answer book that you're going to upload is going to be mostly numbers. So therefore, it doesn't go through SafeAssign, because SafeAssign checks for plagiarism in terms of plagiarism in general, and then also plagiarism from one student to another in terms of have you copied someone else's work? Is the paragraph that you've written or essay that you've written all your own works? Obviously, with numerics, we can't check that. I will come back to that in a second. So for that reason, you do not upload a Word document, not a .docx file. So you are, in all likelihood, you're going to be completing your assignment in Word. Most of you usually do. But when you have finished completing your assignment in Word, you must convert it to a PDF file. You guys know how to do that. I'll type up instructions if you don't. It's very simple. You go Word document open, top left-hand corner, you click on File, and then the drop-down menu, you click on Export, and then on the screen that opens, you click on Convert to PDF or Export to PDF, and it does it all for you. You just have to give the file a name, save it, and then you upload the PDF file. Okay. It's very important because I have to have a PDF file to mark. I do not mark Word files because they're marked in a different manner to the way numeric PDF files are marked. So you must upload a PDF file so that I can mark it. So, you know, your assignments will be marked online and then re-uploaded for you. And then when the National Office releases the marks, they will then give you guys access to either read online or download your marked file with any comments that I may have typed onto the file as well. And then I will also, in all likelihood, give you guys a general feedback as to how everybody did and where the issues were. So again, you guys don't get a pre-printed answer book. You will just complete your assignment on a blank Word document typed out, preferably in whatever format that you want to complete it. It has to be legible, it must be neat, leave plenty of spaces between questions, preferably a question per page. A new question on a new page makes it easier for you and it makes it easier for me. Okay, it's digital, so nobody's wasting paper. We're not killing the trees, so lay your work out really well. If you're not comfortable typing a lot of numbers and calculations into Word, which is absolutely fine, you're not obliged to do that. You can handwrite your answers in an exam pad or some kind of plain paper. It has to be 100% legible. I can't battle to read it. It must be neat and you must use a dark black pen, preferably something like a fine liner. What are these? This is a Pilot. These thin fine liners, or yeah, some kind of a black fine liner, because that gives a nice, neat black outline that's easier to mark than if you were using a ballpoint. So that's first prize. If you've got a black ballpoint, just make sure it's a nice, strong pen if you are going to handwrite. And if you do handwrite your pages all out, you must number the pages in the correct order. So you write the numbers on the pages in the correct order, and then scan them in the correct order, because I can't mark page 3 first and then your next page is 5 and page 1 is further down the line. They have to be in the correct order, and all of the pages must be in one PDF file in the correct order. Save it as the PDF file and then upload that PDF file. Okay. You guys probably know that you can use, there's apps on your cell phone. You can use scanner apps, so you can use that. Just make sure that the photograph that you're taking with your cell phone in the scanner app is 100% legible. You go and check it yourself to see whether you could read it completely, and if you're happy with it, then upload it. Okay, because remember, if you can't read the scan, then I'm not going to be able to read it either. So don't lose marks. If I can't read it, I can't mark it. Then the third option is that you'll see in the option where you go to upload your assignment, there is an option there to type the assignment directly into a document on Learn, so you can use that option, but that might be a little bit tricky. So preferably that would be your last resort. Okay, that's just talking about the phone. And then submission links. Again, you guys have probably done this several times already, uploading assignments. So you know, you go to your main module menu, you go to the assessment submission menu down the left-hand side, and in that menu you will find the option submission links, and you click on that, and you will then have to click on the assignment where you go through to accept the plagiarism declaration, and then it will give you the link to upload your PDF document. Okay. Also, guys, I sometimes get emails from students that are panicking because when they uploaded their document, they got a similarity report with a very high percentage. So remember, because we are uploading numeric calculations that will all look similar, and because you're uploading a PDF document, you probably will get a high similarity report, but you can ignore any similarity reports from Safe Assign. I'm not going to look at any Safe Assign report for these assignments. Okay. But where it comes to the copying issue, so I know students consult each other when they're doing assignments, and you ask each other, what did you do and what did you do? That's perfectly fine. You're allowed to do that. But what you are not allowed to do is one student complete the question and then pop it up on WhatsApp for all the other students to copy. I will pick that up. I can assure you I will pick it up if all the students have all typed in the same answer or the same file. And in that case, the student that shared the answer and everybody else will all get naught for that question. It happens from time to time, and we identify it, and it is not allowed to copy. Okay. Please, please don't do that. You must make your own attempt. What sometimes happens if students copy, if there's one particular spelling mistake or one silly little typo or one calculation error, and then 5 students all have that identical error or typo, it's very easy to pick up that the students have then shared answers between themselves. So don't do that. Okay. We're going to cover that issue now again in a minute on the next document that we're going to do. Okay. All right, so I'm going to upload this document, so please read through it, take note of it, and these are all instructions on this document. It's things that you must do. It's not please do this, it's requirements. Okay. So I will put that into an announcement together with this next document that we're going to have a look at now, which is the lesson plan. So you will have these to refer to. Just hold on while this next page uploads. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that. My load shedding has just started at 6 o'clock, and I see this lamp is my LED lamp is not very strong. I might have to dash off and get another one from somewhere else in the house in a minute because it's starting to get dark. I have got a power supply for my Wi-Fi, and my laptop is also plugged into the inverter, so I will have power throughout our session, so we don't have to worry about that. It's just I don't have, obviously the lights in the room are not on the inverter. Okie dokie, so this is the lesson plan. So this basically takes us through, just gives you a few little pointers question by question, and again some other important stuff that you need to take note of. So the question that Evan asked in a minute about referencing, you guys are academic students, and every single assignment that you hand in is an academic paper, and that means that referencing applies across the board. Plagiarism, referencing, copying, all of those rules apply. You will also use the exact same referencing system that you do across the rest of VC, which is the Harvard referencing system. That's all been explained to you, and you've had training on that, and it's all available to you guys online on your student pages, as well as usually they have links to it in module home pages as well. Where it comes to these numeric assignments, you don't have to reference calculations. So, because obviously that would be extremely difficult. You've got a whole long calculation. So how do you go about in-text referencing a calculation? Obviously, it's impossible. So we don't have to do that. Referencing for numeric assignments would really be for theory questions. So, you know, in your learning objectives, in lots of these learning units, we've got learning objectives that will require you to write a paragraph. If you get a question like that in an assignment, you definitely have to in-text reference and give a reference, a bibliography page at the end for those as well. Calculations don't have to be referenced, but it probably is a good idea to include a bibliography page at the end of your assignment if you have used any sources other than your textbook in looking up information or background information or assistance in working out how to do your calculation. That's just good form to do that. It shows that where you have consulted sources, you have referenced those sources. And if you wanted to, at the end of a question, let's say you do question 1, you do your total calculation, and if you did use a specific source for that calculation, then at the bottom of that calculation, just put your reference. Okay. So always, it's very good. I'm glad you asked that, Evan. It means that you are thinking about referencing, which is excellent. You must always keep referencing in mind. And then these other lines that I've got here are also just places where students just throw away silly marks. So come back and just read this and make sure that you have followed all of the instructions that they gave you in the required section of each question. So when you've answered the question, go back and read the required again and say, did I answer what they asked me? Have I answered all parts of the question that they asked me? Did they ask me for a conclusion, and have I given the conclusion as well as the calculation? Did they ask me for a decision? Did they ask me state whether Mr. A could do this or not, and have I answered that question with a calculation as well as a yes or a no if that's what they asked me? Okay, so please read that, make sure, because if they've asked you for something, there'll be questions allocated to that answer, and if the answer's not there, then even if the rest of your work is correct, you'll lose those marks. Also, don't misread a question. What I find students do also across the board is they've practiced with the textbook, or they've practiced with past exam papers or past test papers. So they're familiar with certain questions. Then they read the exam question or the assignment question, and it reminds them of a question they've already done, and they think that that's the question they've been asked, and then they give that answer. Go back and read the required. Don't misread it. Make sure that what you're answering is what this question is asking, and that you're not answering something that you saw somewhere else. I can't tell you how often that happens. You also know by now that you must show all of your workings. So show all of your workings means that in your on your page, on your answer page, if you've done a calculation to get to an answer, that you're going to then use that answer somewhere else in your calculation, you must write that calculation down so that we can follow that full sequence of I worked this out and I got this answer, then using that answer, I then worked something else out. Because you will lose marks if you don't show your workings. If at the bottom your answer is incorrect and the workings aren't there, I can't give you any of what they call the method marks. Or some students sometimes call them the work with marks. The workings must be on the page for me to be able to give you those marks. Theory questions in this paper, we don't have any theory questions, but there might be in later assignments. Definitely there will be in the exam. So if the question is out of 10 marks or 15 marks, make sure that you've got 10 individual facts or 15 individual points that can be marked. Okay, so that will all be there. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. Okay, guys, just give me 1 sec. I just need to dash into the next room. I'm just going to go and fetch the other lamp. This one is fading fast. And I don't want to get interrupted in the middle of talking about a question. Okay, just give me 1 sec. Okay, that's way better. Now I've got some light that I can rely on. Okay, there's just a lot of reflection, so don't worry about that. Okay, so for question 1, where's my paper? This first note that I've made here actually applies to all of the questions in this paper, which is super important. Not so much for question 2, because obviously that's your EVA question, but for question 1 and for question 3. The first thing that you're going to do when you read these questions is to identify which pattern of cash flows is involved in this question. So in the copy of the textbook that I've got, which is I think it's a 2020 book, so the page numbers might be slightly different to yours, but you'll find them within a page or two. On page 27, you've got that paragraph in the middle of the page called Basic Patterns of Cash Flow. You must read that and make sure that you understand that paragraph before you go on and then study the calculations, which are different for each type of cash flow. Because if you identify the incorrect cash flow pattern, you will then be using the completely incorrect formula. Okay, so that's the very first thing that you must have a look. So identify the pattern of cash flow. Make sure you are going to be doing the correct calculation, page 27. Make sure you understand the difference between a cash flow that is either paid or received at the beginning of a year, in other words, on day 1 of a year, as opposed to that cash flow that takes place, whether it's in or out, on day 365 of a year, because this is going to affect that present or future value interest factor that you then use. So your question 1.1 says calculate the present value. Okay, so you've got to know what are you being asked to calculate. You're being asked to calculate a present value of the series of cash flows, and that the cash flows took place at the end of the year. And then in 1.2, they've asked you what will the future value of that series of cash flows be if the cash flow took place at the beginning of the year. Okay. So the one wants present value, the other one wants future value. In the first one, the cash flows take place on the last day of each year. And in the second question, the cash flow takes place on day 1 of each year. So in your textbook, you must work through these, your present value and future value examples, and make sure that you understand the difference between present value and future value, how you're going to calculate that. Make sure also that you use the correct table. Please don't make the mistake by incorrectly identifying which financial table that you use and then you use the wrong factor. So triple check that you've used the correct table. Something that you can use just to check yourself, if you are doing a present value of a lump sum, the present value will always be, will always be less than 1, present value factor. Let me just write the present value factor will always be less than 1, and the present value rand amount will always be less than the future value, smaller amount than the future value. And that will be exactly vice versa if they have asked you to calculate a future value. So a future value factor for a lump sum, the factor is always going to be greater than 1. It'll be 1 point something or 2 point something. And the future value rand amount is always going to be a larger rand value than the present value that you started out with. Because you start out with a small present value and you grow it by compounding interest into the future, so that in the future that rand value is bigger. And that's why the factor is always bigger than 1, because the amount you end up with at the end is greater than the 1 that you started with. When you work in the opposite way round and you're working from the future back to the past, the future amount is greater, the present value is smaller. So you are slowly going to, from the future, smaller, 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 to end up with a smaller amount than what you started with in the calculation. That's why the factor is always going to be 0 point something, because you're going to end up, your present value is going to be a fraction, 0 point something, of what your future value is. That is a super important clue to help you check in an assignment or exam, have you used the correct factor and have you made the correct decision in what you're doing. Check what factor, check, have I ended up with a bigger or a smaller amount than I started with, and that will tell you whether you did calculate a present value or a future value. Okay, does that make sense? These are really the little things that make the difference between understanding what you're actually doing. In this particular question, they've told you to use the financial table, so they don't want you to use a financial calculator. In other words, you may not use a financial calculator for this question. Your answer must be written down to show us that you have looked up each present value or future value factor using the tables. Okay, so your textbooks have got the tables in them, and there's also a set of tables attached to the question paper. Those last 4 pages on the question paper are the present and future value tables. Make sure you check the heading of the table, that you're using the correct one. So in your textbooks on page 25, there is a discussion on financial tables. They explain to you how they work, and then in example 2.1, they give you an example of how to look up, work out which factor you want and how to look that up. Okay. What did I say here? And then also please pay attention carefully to the calculation of the value of each of the individual cash flows. So look at your question, if you've got your question paper in front of you. They've given us a table on the question paper with a list of cash flows from year 1 to year 7. Because we're third year students now, they don't just give us a list of amounts and we look up a factor and multiply it and get an answer, because that isn't testing our ability to apply our intellect or what we know. So in the first one, they've given us a cash flow of 18.5 million. Take note that when it's in brackets, it means the cash flow is negative, which means that is cash that flowed out of our business. And when the cash flow is positive, it means that's cash flow that came into our business. So all the pluses will be the cash flows in and the minuses are cash flows out. So in year 2, in year 4 and 6 and 7, they haven't given us an amount. They've given us a calculation that we have to do. So year 2 says it is a 12 million rand increase from year 1. Year 4 says an increase of 25% from year 3. So in other words, year 3 plus another 25%. So the cash flow in year 4 was 25% more than the cash flow in year 3, and so on. So just read those carefully and make sure you've done that calculation correct, and that when you do the calculation, you've got inflows and outflows indicated correctly, with brackets for minuses and no brackets for pluses. Okay. So that part could turn out to be tricky if you don't pay attention. So slow yourself down, read carefully, make sure you're not misreading, and do those calculations of the cash flow amount carefully so you don't start losing marks straight away over there. This question you can definitely get 100% for if you do it carefully and you follow the instructions and you're doing present value end of year, future value beginning of year. You write out your table neatly, you get your cash flows correct. It's easy to get 100% for this question. Okay, but you have to be careful. Remember, we are finance and accounting students, BCom. Our whole ethic is that we pay attention to detail. Okay, Evan asked for question 1, can we use the format on page 30 of the textbook to answer the question? Let me just see what's on page 30. So the answer to that is no, because that's not using the financial tables. Is that, am I right? I think that's what you're asking. You need to remember, identify your cash flow. You've got 7 years worth of cash flow. So you're going to have a table with 7 lines on it, one underneath each other. And your table is going to look like, let's go to, where are we here? The table is going to look more like on page 42. You got it, Evan? So you'll do a table that will, your format will look like that table on page 42. Example 2.10 and example 2.9. Okay. Oh, really? Gosh, that's a big difference in page numbers. Yeah, 2018. So if you have a look over here, on this is a continuation of question 1. Students should refer to the following in their textbooks. Section 2.7 in the textbook. So in my textbook, that's on page 40, which is the future and present value of a mixed stream of cash flow. So unfortunately, I am giving away a bit of the answer there. I'm not supposed to. And then if you work your way through example 2.9 and 2.10, and you go through question 2.6, make sure you could do all of those 3 questions yourself, and then you know you're ready to do question 1.1 and 1.2. Okay. And if when you're going through these questions, there's something that you don't understand, then send me a message. But remember, just say, ma'am, I don't understand any of the calculations, because I can't help you with that. But say, in year, whatever, I don't understand why they used this factor. Whatever. Be specific, and then I can be specific in my answer to help you. Okay. Anybody got any other questions about question 1? Anything else about question 1? I can't tell you that, Evan, unfortunately. Sorry. Okay, you guys can chat among yourselves on your WhatsApp, and I don't mind if you say, okay, I got XYZ as my answer. Did you also get XYZ? That's absolutely fine to check that with each other on WhatsApp. I can't tell you the answer. And then you may not share your workings. That's the only thing. Okay. You may not share your workings with each other, because that will get you both 0. It's absolutely fine to check with each other, because I know it's very daunting. Like, you get an answer, then you're not sure, is it right, is it wrong, about being completely. So check with each other, and that'll keep you guys on track. Okay, there's no problem with you guys doing that. Any other? Let me just check that I miss any other questions in the chat here. I don't think so. Yeah, okay, Evan, I'm just going back there where you said page 30, the manual calc. Yes, it must be the manual calculation method. First column will be the amount of the cash flow, and then your second column has got your first column will be the year, second will be the amount of the cash flow, your third column will be the annuity factor that you're using. You must write that annuity factor down to prove that you consulted the financial tables, and then your fourth column will be the future or present value factor that you calculated when you multiplied the cash flow by the factor. And then don't forget to add up your fourth column, the future value or present value column. That column must have a total, which is then the total for the entire set of 7 years of cash flow. So each one of the 7 years will have a present or a future value, and then you'll add those up to get a total. Yes, Jason, it is recorded, as always, unless somebody forgets to press record, which in this case I didn't, so you will have a recording. Hopefully the recording's working. Sometimes every now and again there's a glitch and it doesn't work, but we always hope for the best. Any other questions? Do you guys feel okay about question 1? Okay, so question 2 is actually the question I've got most emails about. And I'm just going to put this lamp in a place where it doesn't kill my eyes, but I can see my question paper. Yeah, Jason, you should, everybody, all the lecturers should record the sessions, and then they will all upload them for you. So no matter which one you've missed, you should always be able to access them. As I say, sometimes things go wrong, but there should be a recording. 99% of the time, there'll always be a recording available. So I did upload a previous lecture that I've done on economic value added EVA to the YouTube channel, and I've shared the link in your announcement, so you should all have got that that announcement. Again, as I say, please guys, make sure that whatever email address you've got linked, that your announcements go to, make sure you are monitoring that it comes directly to your phone screen and pings when you get an announcement, because there's a lot. The only way I've got to communicate with you is through those announcements. So you must make sure that you are following them. And then also on that YouTube channel, and I see a lot of the students have done it. If you subscribe to the YouTube channel, every time I do upload a new recording there, which is where this recording will go, it will also send you a notification that something new has been uploaded there. And then you also immediately know, okay, I can go and watch another video. Okay, so the videos I've uploaded so far are only those ones that are relevant to this first assignment. And then once this assignment is out of the way, I will then upload videos that will then be relevant to your next couple of chapters. So I see a lot of the students have already watched the video on EVA, and if you haven't, it's more of an audio than a video because there's just the one slide, but I do a full talk through of the whole section in the textbook on economic value added and explain exactly how that calculation works. So you must listen to that. There's just some waffle in the beginning. I mean, you guys know how YouTube works. You guys know how you can fast forward. I think there's a little button there that you can fast forward 30 seconds at a time, or if you can see I'm waffling with the students about dates or something, then just go forward to get to the section. So although the video is an hour long, you might not have to listen to that full hour. So don't get put off if you see that there's a long video, but it's long because it is a full lecture on economic value added and how it works. Yes, Lunga? You can go ahead and talk. Is everybody else able to hear? I see my microphone is working. Yeah, my microphone is on and it is moving up and down. So, yep. Shane, I'm sorry you're battling, Lunga. I saw just now. I don't know what to suggest. Maybe refresh your page if you're on a laptop, or otherwise go out of the session and come back in again. That might help. I'm sorry, that's really frustrating. Otherwise, let me just put this in the chat. Remember, there will be a recording that you'll be able to go and listen to afterwards if you've battled with the online session. Okay, so if you listen to that audio on YouTube, then you should manage better with this question too, because the question follows those principles exactly. With EVA, we've got a formula. That formula requires us to calculate two amounts, or two totals. This is from Learning Unit 1, by the way, the EVA. So we've got to calculate two things. The one is NOPAT, and the other one is then the total invested capital. So there are specific rules that you have to follow to calculate the NOPAT amount. And those rules are basically the ones in example, let me go back to page 6. The rules for NOPAT, page 6. This is just kind of obviously more or less where you'll find it. If you don't go and read those rules on NOPAT and understand them and study them, you will battle with any of the other questions, because then if you just try and wing any question just by looking at the example, you won't understand why did they do that? Why did they add that amount? Why did they subtract that amount? Why did it get added back to that year and not that year? That is explained to us in the rules, and we're going to apply those rules exactly. And if we do, our answer at the end is going to be correct. So the way you're going to do this question is right back basically from section 1.3, the whole of section 1.3 in your textbook. You're going to read all 4 or 5 of those pages. You must read them and understand them. And then you're going to work your way through example 1.1 and follow each line in that example so that you understand, why did they put that amount there? Why was that done like that? And when you've understood that, then you can do, what's the question number? I've got it over here somewhere. Example 1.1, it's revision question 1 at the end of the chapter. You can follow that, which is slightly more complicated than the example. And when you're happy that you understand how the solution to revision question 1 is done, then you come and you tackle this one. Because the descriptions in the question in the assignment are different to the example, which is kept simple, because the examples are always there just to illustrate principles to you. And when you've understood those principles, the question is then slightly more complicated. And when you've understood that, we can give you any question that you then apply those same principles to, and you will be able to get to the right answer. So your questions in the assignment are not exactly like those in the textbook, because we're testing, do you understand the principles that you are applying? Not can you just copy a solution from the textbook. So they are tricky. It's not 100% straightforward. You have to work for your marks. What have I got your EVA? Basically what's on this page has exactly what I've just said. Revision, examples, YouTube. Okay, that's everything I've just said. Oh, and then also at this last sentence. So just remember, often throughout this third year in finance, they will include in questions formulas or principles that you were taught last year, either in finance or in accounting. And you will be expected to remember them and apply them. So with finance particularly, and accounting, the work incorporates everything that you've learned so far. Okay, there's no, you can't say, okay, I've finished second year, now I'm going to do third year. And you'll see throughout this year, particularly when it comes to the exams, that will be true. So always just make sure, just go and do a little revision. The most common chapter that they refer back to in finance is, I think it's LU2 from Finance 2A, that ratio and analysis. Those ratios come up often throughout this year. So make sure that you're familiar with them. Okay, that's just a heads up. Let me just go back there. Has Evan gone offline now? Okay, so Evan's question for question 2 says, is the net profit before tax, is it the revenue times the 18% to get to the profit before? Yes. Okay, so that's one of the things that I'm referring to where I'm saying apply your ratios from last year. So one of the ratios you did last year was the net profit ratio. So you guys know that the net profit ratio tells you that in this case, they've said for 2021, my net profit percentage or ratio is 18.5%. So that means my net profit is 18.5% of my revenue. So because they've told us that my revenue is before tax, if I take 18.5% of that 6.5 million, that is before tax. But my EVA calculation says that I must work with after tax figures. And they tell you in the information for question 2 that the tax rate is 28%. So you then know you must deduct 28% to get to the net profit after tax. So that's an example of how you will be applying stuff that you already know to questions like this. It's also a very good example of what I mean when I said, please read all the details and the descriptions of everything carefully, because if you hadn't read in that left-hand side that says net profit before tax, and you just assume that it was after tax, the same as the example in the textbook, then already you're making your first mistake and losing your first marks. Okay. So Evan has had to go off to another lecture, so hopefully he'll get that. Okay. Tiana, unfortunately, I can't do a whole entire example now. You've got example 1.1 in your textbook, so follow that example. Keep that example in front of you while you listen to my explanation, because my explanation talks to that example 1.1. In my explanation, I'm saying to you, in this year, this is why they added the 40,000 back, it's why they deducted the 20,000 in year 2003, etc. And also study those pages from 1.3 on page 4, the whole explanation of EVA and the principles on page 5, on page 6, all those bullet points tell us what we have to do to calculate, what adjustments we must do to get to NOPAT. You have to study that and understand it, and then example 1.1 should make sense. And then if you go through example 1.1 together with that YouTube explanation, you should then understand it. And then, Tiana, if there's a specific amount that you don't understand, why did they do this, or why did they add the 40, or why did they deduct the 20, then ask me that. It's very difficult for me to help you when you say I don't understand the whole example. Okay, when you say you're struggling a lot, I can absolutely understand that it's not an easy thing. Once you've got it, I promise you it will be fine. Once you've got it, the penny will drop and you'll be fine. Work through it line by line, and the specific thing that you don't understand why they did what they did, then send me a message and I'll do that. Okay. So when you say where you are still lost, there must be a point at which you're getting lost. There must be an amount to say, I don't know why they did this. So starting right from calculation of NOPAT, the top line says profit after tax. Give yourself a tick. Do I understand how they got to profit after tax? The next line says add back the interest expense. Number one, do I understand why they're adding it back? And do I understand that they have calculated the after tax interest expense? And do I understand how they did that? Then we've got a total. So that's the only after tax adjustment that we make is on that interest line. To that subtotal, I'm looking at page 9 at the example, then everything underneath that, we don't make any more adjustments for tax. We add back any research and development costs. We add back any non-cash amounts, and we deduct any amortization of R&D amounts that were added back in previous years. Okay. Lunga, what you did in accounting 1A, are you talking about the net profit? Yeah. Revenue, yeah, exactly. Yes. Literally. So that is like remember what we're doing here with EVA is we are taking the actual financials of the company, the income statement that the accountant has produced. We're taking that income statement and we are making management accounting adjustments to it to arrive at this amount that we are calling the economic value added, because we're saying as management accountants, this is going to be more informative for us and our investors than just the pure financial accounts drawn up according to IFRS, because IFRS has got its specific rules that have to be followed. But as a management accountant, I want to know more about the underlying profitability of this business. Not so much profitability, is the business adding value to the investors? So remember also going right back to first year, they also told you there's a difference between financial accounting and management accounting. And in EVA, this is what we're applying. As accountants, we've kept strictly to IFRS and we produced the financial accounts. And now as management accountants, we want to use that information and get a bit creative with it to give us something that's more meaningful to us as investors. Does that make sense? So again, if you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, it often makes it easier to follow. And then question 2.2, I'm not going to spend time on this. Again, you guys can chat among yourselves on the WhatsApp group. We've got a very specific formula for NOPAT. So in your textbook, not for NOPAT, for EVA, our EVA formula says that EVA is equal to, EVA is a RAND value we're going to calculate, and in order to get to that RAND value, I'm going to take an amount called NOPAT, net operating profit after tax, which I'm going to calculate according to the little table on page 9. I'm going to take my financial accounts, I'm going to adjust that to get to NOPAT, and then when I've got the NOPAT amount from that, I'm going to subtract an amount which is my invested capital, which is also an amount that we have to calculate. It's the second table where we calculate, whoopsie, what did I do there? Where we calculate an amount, the invested capital minus WACC. WACC, weighted average cost of capital, which is basically the interest that the company has to pay to obtain that capital that they are using to that they have got invested in the business in order to generate profits. So invested capital is calculated by, if you go to page 10, we take, I'm just going to call it EC. Invested capital is the equity in the company plus any interest-bearing debt or loans. So in other words, equity we know is permanent capital. It's capital that will be invested long-term in the company. And interest-bearing loans is also generally loans that we have got from the bank that we will have at our disposal for a long time. So the capital invested in the business are those funds that we have got available to invest in the business to generate profits, which is the equity of the business and interest-bearing loans. So in 2.2, they have asked us to calculate equity. So if you go back to the formula that I've typed in the chat box, EVA, they've given us in 2.2, they told us what EVA is, equals NOPAT, which we can calculate using our little NOPAT table, minus invested capital. So in place of invested capital, we are going to say equity plus interest-bearing loans, multiplied by WACC. WACC is a known, we know what that is. The interest-bearing loans, we know what that is. So in our algebraic equation, the amount that we have to solve for is then equity. So you know how equations work. You then put equity on the left-hand side of the equation. Equity equals, and then you using algebraic principles, you rearrange your formula so that you can solve for equity. Do you guys follow that? Does that make sense? So that's actually a bit of maths that you do in there. It's really a mathematical problem. Non-cash expenses, you will use that. Non-cash expenses in calculating NOPAT, you add back non-cash expenses in the year in which they were incurred. And then when you are calculating invested capital, you then add any non-cash amounts. If I incurred a non-cash expense in 2022, that amount is added back to my opening invested capital for 2023, just like in the table on page 10. So if you look at the table in example 1.1 on page 10, you'll see that in the 2002 column, there's nothing in the R&D on the R&D line, and there's nothing on the non-cash line. But in 2003, I have added back 10,000 Rand to my opening invested capital, which is the 10,000 Rand that I added back to my 2002 NOPAT. If you go back to page 9, 2002 column, right at the bottom, I added back in 2002 10,000 Rand non-cash expense. So in other words, that 10,000 Rand, I'm no longer recording it as an expense. And if I don't have an expense, that means my equity increases. So I'm taking it out of expenses and putting it into equity. So add it back to the NOPAT column so that my profit increases, and add it to my opening invested capital so that my equity increases. I'm just trying to think what you mean. You include it when you're solving for X, non-cash expenses. Well, they've given you, yes, if you, yeah, because you've got to calculate NOPAT, so you will absolutely do that exact, you've got to do the exact calculation, yeah, because you have to, they didn't give you NOPAT, did they, in 2.2? So in 2.1, they want the EVA for 2021, and then in 2.2, they want the equity for 2022. So that means in order to calculate equity for 2022, you have to calculate NOPAT and invested and the rest of invested capital for 2022. So that finally your only unknown is equity, and then you solve for equity. Does that make sense? You have to, yeah, you have to do the exact calculations as in example 1.1. So every time you've got to calculate EVA, you have to calculate NOPAT, which is profit after tax plus and minus the adjustments, and you have to calculate your new adjusted invested capital, which is your open invested capital plus or minus any adjustments. Okay. Once you understand the principles, it kind of, the penny will drop and it doesn't seem as difficult. Okay, so I'm going to leave you. Anybody else got a specific question with question 2.2 that they're not sure of? Are you, does that make you feel a bit better, Lunga? I'm just looking back at at your questions here, Lunga. You said, aren't you supposed to calculate gross profit first? No, you don't have to calculate gross profit, because if you have a look at what they've given you, they only gave you revenue and cost of sales. So revenue minus cost of sales equals gross profit. That's irrelevant, because we want net profit, and we know that net profit is a percentage of revenue. Does that make, did you get, I hope you got that, Lunga. Remember, go back, if you've still got your second year textbook, go back to that learning unit 2, ratios and analysis, or ratios and interpretation, and just go back and look at your net profit percentage ratio. I'm really feeling for you, Tiana. I do understand that's not, this third year finance is not easy. So don't feel bad. It isn't easy. It is difficult. It is going to take time to sit with stuff and as you say, figure them out and understand them. That's exactly it. Revenue multiplied by your net profit percentage, it will give you the Rand value of your net profit. Because that's the formula they taught us last year, right? Okay, I don't want to take up too much time. We've already gone 7:15. So let's just move on to question 3. Remember, any questions you've got, you can send me messages via Learn, and I will answer them as quickly as I'm able. Okay, so our question 3 is also a tricky question. If you don't understand, again, which pattern of cash flow are you looking at and which variable am I solving for? So when I say which variable am I solving for, remember when we're doing present value and future value calculations, whether it's the present value of a lump sum or the present or future value of a mixed stream of cash flows, and sometimes my pattern of cash flow is an annuity. But the variables that will be involved will always be the following. It will either be a PMT, a PV, an FV, it will be I, or it will be N, and then sometimes we have got M as well. Have I included everything? Present value, future value, I think that's it. So in a question, like question 3, when they mention an amount or a number of years, you must identify what variable is that. So if we look at the question, Mr. Y, an avid sports fan, wishes to attend the 28th Summer Olympics in Los Angeles in 5 years' time because he will be retiring from work a few months before the event is held. So we are obviously at this moment in the present, and 5 years' time is going to be the future. Okay, so then we said the current price of a flight to Los Angeles is 25,000 Rand. So which of those variables is that 25,000 Rand? Mr. Wire is sitting today with his advisor, travel agent, and the travel agent tells him today that flight costs 25,000 Rand. Which of those, that 25,000 Rand is represented by which of those variables? Yes, it's a present value, because today, day 1, which is today, I'm sitting here, it's worth 25,000 Rand. That's the present value. So Mr. Wire wants to know, what will that flight cost in 5 years' time? So what is he trying to work out? Which of those variables does he have to calculate? Exactly. And what is my formula for future value? Future value equals present value multiplied by, I haven't got all these fancy where is that? Okay, future value is equal to the present value multiplied by 1 plus r, that should be in brackets, to the power of minus n. So we already know what the present value is. That's the 25,000 Rand. What does R represent? R is what? What are you looking for to substitute into that R in the formula? Yes, 6.5%, but what does it represent? It's the inflationary percentage that by which that 25% is going to increase over the period to get to the future. So they told us that the price of tickets is going to increase by 6.5% per annum. For how long is it going to increase? At 6.5%. Read again. Increase in the price of tickets at 6.5% per annum for the next 2 years. 2 years. Okay, read carefully. 6.5% per annum for the next 2 years. So we first have to calculate future value is equal to 25,000 Rand times 1.065 to the power of minus 2. That answer will be the price of a ticket in 2 years' time, right? Then it says after that, the ticket price is going to increase by 8.25% until the Olympics is held, which is then 3 years. So then I still haven't got to my future value in 5 years, so I have to do future value equals present value again times 1 plus r again to the minus n. Now my present value, what am I going to use for present value in this next section? I've already calculated future value is equal to 25,000 Rand times 1.065 to the power of minus 2 exactly. So the answer to that first calculation is what I'm going to put in where PV is. And then I'm going to say that answer, PV, multiplied by 1.0825 to the power of minus 3. So for 2 years to minus 2, it increased by 6.5%. And then for the next 3 years to minus 3, they've got the instruction in this question that, oh, sorry, where's the instructions? Just look at your instructions in bold at the end. Round all Rand calculations to the nearest whole number and all percentages to 2 decimal places. Okay. And then, so you've got to do 2 calculations to get your future value for 5 years. So with these questions, if you just break it down step by step, you've got the formulas, my present value formula, my future value formula, my formula for present or future value of an annuity, okay, which are the ones that we're going to be using. So now we know the price, the future, what he's going to have to pay for the ticket in 5 years' time. And then what does the next paragraph say? The next paragraph says, together with the price of the tickets, he also has to pay for his accommodation and all his other travel expenses. And that's likely to cost $9,000 in 5 years' time. And they estimate that in 5 years' time, the exchange will be 22.50 Rand. So how are you going to calculate the Rand value of money he's going to need for all those other expenses? Because he has to pay for his ticket, flight ticket, and he has to pay for the other expenses. So his other expenses is going to be calculated how? We also need to get a Rand value. Exactly. The amount of dollars multiplied by the exchange rate equals the Rand amount. Now we can add up the total Rand amount that Mr. Wire needs to be able to do his complete trip in 5 years' time. We take the Rand value, exactly, we take the Rand value of the air ticket that we calculated, we add to that the Rand value of all of his other expenses, and now we know the total Rand amount that Mr. Wire needs in 5 years' time. Okay, so that's the first calculation that you've got to do. Future value of 2 years, future value of plus 3 years to get to the future value of 5 years. What's the Rand value of the $9,000? Add that all together and I now know what his trip is going to cost in Rands. Then what's the actual question that they've asked us? They say the required is calculate the monthly annuity payments that Mr. Wire needs to make in order to pay for the shortfall. So a shortfall means there's going to be a difference between the amount of money that he needs, which we now know what it is, and the amount of money that he's going to have if he makes this investment in point number 1 at the bottom of page 6 of your assignment, where it says his investment advisor has told him that he must invest 80,000 Rand in a fixed deposit today, and he will receive 12% interest per annum that will be payable every 6 months for 5 years. So the next calculation you've got to do is if he makes that investment at the end of the 5 years, how much money will he have? then you're going to take that answer and you're going to subtract it from the amount that we know he needs, and that difference is the shortfall, the rand value of the shortfall. No. Yes, for the 80,000. And the reason that that's a future value is because he's investing 80,000 is a lump sum that he is investing, and he's leaving that 80,000 rand in the investment for 5 years. So that's the future value of a lump sum. Just remember, we always, in these calculations, for the value of n, it is always n times m, and for the value of I, it is always r divided by m. And m is equal to the number of times in a year that interest will compound. So in this case, for his fixed deposit, it says interest will compound every 6 months. So how many times a year will his interest compound? If interest is going to compound every 6 months, how many times per annum? Twice. So for the value of n in that future value calculation, we are going to say n is 5 years, so 5 times, and m for Mary is going to be 2. 5 years times twice a year. And the value for I, the interest rate in that future value calculation, is going to be R, which is the interest rate that he's going to get on that fixed deposit, which is 12%, divided by M for Mary, which is 2. You'll find examples like that in the textbook as well, but these are just things to keep track of. Okay, so now we know how to calculate the rand value of the shortfall. Then they say, now we've got to know, how is Mr. Wire going to save up the money for that shortfall? What happens if you multiply by half? Yeah, you'll get the same answer, but you'll get the same answer, but remember, that's easy when it's twice a year because it's half, but when it gets to monthly or quarterly or whatever, it's a little trickier. So rather stick to R divided by M, and then you'll never make a mistake. You won't get marked wrong if you do it like that. Okay. So remember further up in the chat, I wrote down a list of all of the variables that we use in these calculations. So what is the variable that will represent a monthly amount that Mr. Wire must save up? If I'm going to invest a repetitive monthly amount every month for the next 5 years, what variable do I use to represent that repetitive monthly amount? Anybody know? PMT, because remember the definition of an annuity says that any amount where I either receive or pay out the exact same amount at repetitive intervals of time is called an annuity. So 2 things must be present for it to be an annuity. The amount must be the same, and I must pay it at similar intervals over a period of time. So they have said for that shortfall, Mr. Wire wants to put away a monthly amount over the 5 years so that at the end of the 5 years, that annuity that he's saving up will equal the amount that he's going to be short if all he did was invest that 80,000 rand. So you're going to use the Future value of an annuity formula. We know what the future value in that formula is going to be. What amount are we going to use in the future value of the annuity? We know what it is. Which amount are we going to use? The future value of this annuity that we're going to calculate. That's going to be the amount of the shortfall, because that's the total at the end of the 5 years. That's the total we want to have saved up by putting away an amount of money every month. Okay, I know how much I want. What I'm trying to find out is how much do I have to save every month in order to end up with that amount of the shortfall. It's a monthly annuity, so how many times a year to make up the shortfall, investing in a monthly amount annuity, and he's only going to invest it from year 3 onwards. So year 3, year 4, and year 5. He's going to invest it for 3 years. So N equals 3. What does M equal for this annuity? To make up the shortfall, he is going to invest monthly in an annuity from year 3 onwards. The annuity is projected to offer an interest rate of 16% per annum compounded monthly. So M is going to be N will be 36 because it's going to be 3 times 12. So M equals 12. N for Nelly equals 3 and M for Mary equals 12. So 3 times 12 is 36. Okay. And your value for I, or your interest rate, is going to be 16% per annum. Remember, it's going to be R divided by M. So it's going to be 16% divided by 12. So you know what your future value is. You know what your interest rate is. You know what the value for N is. And we are going to solve for PMT. So you will take the future value of an annuity formula and rearrange it so that it is PMT equals, and then all the other amounts in that formula you are known, you've worked them out, or you know what they are. So again, just using algebra, you will solve for PMT. And that will tell us how much money Mr. Wire needs to save up on a monthly basis. So he will have 2 investments. He'll have the 80,000 Rand lump sum invested for the full 5 years at an interest rate of 12%, compounding every 2 months, every 6 months. And he will also be saving a monthly amount into an annuity every month for 3 years to save up the shortfall, the difference. So you can see all we're using in that question 3 are those simple formulas: future value formula, present value formula of a lump sum, and future value of an annuity. But we have to recognize in a case study like this, we have to recognize in the case study, what formula do I need to calculate what I need to know at each step through the scenario. Okay, guys, so I really want to stop here. I don't want to go on for too long. You guys, it's a lot to concentrate on. Oh, believe me, you will. You will. That's why I always say to you guys, and you'll hear me say it a million times still this semester, the only way to pass finance is to practice questions, difficult ones like these assignment questions, until you can do them without looking at the solution. Because that's exactly what your scenario will be, the exam. You'll be sitting there with a question paper, no textbook in front of you, no solutions, and you're going to have to work through them. So that's how you must practice. if you're going to have to jump hurdles, practice jumping hurdles. If you're going to have to do the pole vault, practice pole vaulting. I know it's just gonna, you know what, it gets easier as you go along, and it is just going to take a lot of time. You just have to be prepared to commit, to make that time commitment, to spend that time doing questions over and over again until they come naturally to you, which they will do if you practice them. Okay, guys, so I'm hoping that this is making you feel a lot better about the assignment. When you break it down and you can understand it. And then I'll be waiting for your questions. So I won't speak to you again before next week, Wednesday, other than on announcements or if I get questions from you. So the very best of luck. I hope it goes well. And I'll look forward to getting your questions. Anyone else got a question now before I sign off? This page that I've got on the screen now, I'll also upload this, and this recording will be available for you also on YouTube. Okay, guys. Thanks for sticking around online. I'm sure it's going to pay off, and best of luck for the assignment. I'm going to stop the recording now and then sign off.